Illnesses, especially rare and chronic diseases, often evoke feelings of indescribable fear and helplessness. We need more research, more allies, and more advocates, and I consider myself a soldier in this fight. Welcome to Chronic Illnesses and Advocacy. My name is Lakshmi, and today we have Professor Stephen Simpson, a renowned nutrition expert and professor at the University of Sydney. His research on the impact of nutrition on animal behavior and growth has significant implications for human health and nutrition. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, Lakshmi.
Okay, so what inspired you to pursue a career in the field of nutrition, and how did you get started in your research?
I started my journey in nutrition as an entomologist. I was fascinated by insects and what causes insects to eat what they eat. So how do insects know what's the appropriate foods for them? And that led me to a study initially of locusts, which are a sort of swarming grasshopper, who you would think wouldn't be particularly careful about what they ate because they're well known for eating just about everything when they produce these enormous plagues that attack crops in North Africa, in parts of Asia, Australia, and other countries as well. And what we discovered was that locusts are actually really clever at knowing what their nutritional needs are, and they're able to translate that into the foods that they select. And particularly, we're able to show that they have what are called specific nutrient appetites. They know when they need protein, carbohydrate, fat, and salt, and they're able to make really appropriate and clever food choices to redress any requirements for those specific nutrients. And that's where we began our study of nutrition. It was in insects, and ultimately that was a journey that's led us to a new understanding of chronic disease, including obesity in humans.
So what are some of the biggest challenges facing the field of nutrition today, and how do you think they can be addressed?
I think the biggest challenge in nutrition is to have what you might call a unifying perspective, an understanding of nutrition that extends all the way from how nutrients interact with our biology, with our immune system, with our metabolism, with our brains, with our microbiome in the gut. We need an understanding that extends from there to how our appetites work, to understand that we have appetites not just for food or energy, but for specific nutrients. And then beyond the individual, to understand how those appetites interact with our food environment and how that can go wrong, how in a modern industrially processed food environment, our appetites, which evolved to help us select nutritionally healthy diets, are now hacked. They're working for the benefit of the major processed food industries, not for the benefit of our health. And it's understanding how we manage the relationship between our biology, especially our appetites, and our food environment that, for me, poses the greatest opportunity and greatest challenge in nutrition science.
So how do you balance your work as a researcher and your work as an educator in the field of nutrition?
I juggle many things. So I am not only a researcher who has interests that span all of those levels we just talked about, from deep in molecular biology all the way through to trying to understand human food systems. I juggle my research interests with leading a major research center, which is designed to do exactly that. So it's called the Charles Perkins Center at the University of Sydney. It's a large center with more than 1,500 members who extend across everything from philosophers and historians and evolutionary biologists to basic biomedical scientists, engineers, mathematicians, physicists, clinicians. And what we've done is to try and bring everybody together to help solve what is ultimately a whole of society challenge. So that's a big part of my life. And then as part of that, also communicating what we do more broadly. And that involves podcasts like this one, writing popular books, like our recent book, Eat Like the Animals, with colleague David Robenheimer here at the University of Sydney, giving talks and all sorts of other public outreach, television work, media work. So you need all of those things, fundamental, innovative research. You need to bring together all the many disciplines that are required to ultimately solve the problem, and you need to translate and communicate what you do.
Can you discuss some of the latest developments in the field of nutrition that you find particularly exciting or promising?
Yes, look, I have, let's pick two things, one at each end of the spectrum of nutritional biology. The thing that we're really excited about and working very hard on at the moment is understanding how protein appetite works and how it is ultimately, we think, a principal driver of the human obesity epidemic. And that involves working in a whole range of different ways, using cutting-edge biomedical research techniques, looking at how protein appetite is controlled physiologically, and then how that interfaces with our food environment, particularly the interaction between our protein appetite and what are called the ultra-processed foods and beverages, which we think are the principal cause of the health challenges facing the modern world as a result of the industrialization of the food system. So they're the two areas we're really keen to understand how ultra processing of foods and the food system is, as I said earlier, hacking our biology, particularly through a relationship with this protein appetite system. So that's where our focus is at the moment.
So, in your opinion, what role does nutrition play in the prevention and treatment of chronic diseases?
Nutrition is profoundly important. So if you take all of the chronic diseases, pretty much, and that extends from the autoimmune conditions, obesity, diabetes, and the other metabolic disorders, cardiovascular diseases, and all of the other, even the interaction between chronic disease and your susceptibility to infection and infectious diseases. And moreover, the biology of aging. So as we get older, our risk of all of these diseases goes up. So aging is a crucial part of this. And what we now understand is that all of the chronic diseases, pretty much, and this includes some of the cognitive diseases as well, of old age, dementia, for example, Alzheimer's, they all share a common biology. So our metabolic biology, our immune systems, it's the dysregulation of those systems that results in unhealthy aging and many different chronic diseases. So there's a common, if you like, biology or biological substrate to all of these things. And the principal drivers of that biology are what we eat, nutrition, our physical activity levels, and our sleep patterns. And fourthly, you can add to that your state of mind, levels of stress and other sort of mental challenges contribute as well. Now, nutrition, physical activity, sleep, and stress all interact on the same biology. And if we can get that right, what we eat, how we sleep, our physical activity levels, and our stress levels, then everything else will be better in our health and our well-being. So nutrition is profoundly important. It is the biggest and strongest influence of our biology that underpins our health and our aging of any influence. And that includes drugs. So the drugs that have been developed to try and improve metabolic health, for example, are targeted at the same pathways in our physiology that are influenced by nutrition and exercise. So nutrition, you cannot overstate the importance of nutrition.
And then can you speak to the importance of individualized nutrition and like those personalized nutrition interventions?
Yes, look, I think at the one extreme, if you look at health advice or nutritional advice, at the one extreme, there's advice given to entire populations, sort of dietary guidelines, food recommendations and guidelines and nutritional guidelines. Now, that's a sort of blanket set of recommendations applied at an entire population level. And then right at the other extreme are cases where, for example, you measure in great detail glucose circulating in the blood, precise measures of your personalized genomic and multi-omic, as it's called. There's all these different things you can measure about the individual physiology of each person, upon which you might design a really, really precise dietary intervention. Now, between those two, there are interventions that I think are available to all, that don't require you to be very wealthy and willing to put yourself through having many different devices wired up to you and have your genome sequenced, et cetera, et cetera. That is not going to be possible at scale. And at the other extreme, blanket advice to an entire population doesn't take account of personal circumstances enough. So what we need is something in the middle. And that involves a couple of things. One is knowing how old you are, your lifestyle, your heritage, your genetic background to some degree. And you can tailor dietary advice to a point where it's not personalized, but it's sufficiently stratified that you can get a great deal of benefit for a large number of people. So the question is, how detailed do you go, or how lack of details do you go? And my argument is that you need something that's in the middle. You want advice that's available to people, that makes sense to them, that takes account of their own personal circumstances, but isn't necessarily high-tech, personalized at the point where you have devices and inserted measuring equipment and what you're wired up to be highly personalized. I don't think that's necessarily the way to go. I think we just need better advice, which is better targeted to people who are living their normal lives without having to be imposed upon too heavily, but are given opportunities and advice that allows them to make better choices given their circumstances, their means, and so on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then last but not least, what advice do you have for young scientists who are interested in pursuing a career in nutrition research?
I can't think of anything more exciting. And certainly my career has not been a typical journey in nutrition. I started off looking at insects and have ended up working with humans. But nutrition, if you think about it, nutrition shapes every aspect of our biology, our interactions with one another, our family, our friends, our social interactions, our built environment, our food system, our world is fundamentally driven by food and nutrition. It's one of the great determinants of the evolution of life on Earth. So reproduction and nutrition are the two, and mortality, they're the three things that have driven life, the evolution of life on Earth. No species has prospered unless it's been able to select a healthy, balanced diet. No species in the evolution of life on Earth, as other than humans recently, has ever had to rely on an app or a computer or a dietitian to help them do that. So I think, and this is a challenge to young scientists, if we can understand the lessons you can learn from the natural world in nutrition, then we'll have a far greater understanding of where we have gone wrong in our modern world.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It was really amazing to hear an expert like yourself talk.
It's a great pleasure, Lakshmi. Thank you for what you're doing and all the best with your podcast.
Thank you. Take care.